Well, hello, whatever time of day or night it is that you're watching this. This is the next in the series of sustainability seminars from the Intensive Care Society. We've been covering, as you know, in previous seminars, a great deal about the threat and the impacts on health, but we're now very focused on solutions. And I'm fortunate to be joined by my co-chair, Eleanor, who will be chipping in, no doubt, along the way. And my thanks to her for organising these seminars, as well as to Cass and the team at the Intensive Care Society. We are joined today by three absolutely superb speakers addressing the solutions bit. And we're going to start with the macro, the big stuff, the national and our health service with Nick Watts, my friend and colleague for many years, now Chief Sustainability Officer for the NHS. And he's responsible for its commitment to delivering this world-class net zero emission health service. He's based in London. He leads the Greener NHS team across the UK and focuses on improving health of patients and public through what he would describe as a robust and accelerated response to climate change. Nick and I have spoken about this a great deal. He is driving, hopefully, a thin end of a wedge, getting things going, but he needs your help to support him. So Nick, let's start with you. Tell us what we should be doing and why.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Hugh. Thank you to the Intensive Care Society. No one gets this, right? No one gets quite the urgency of a positive feedback cycle like an intensivist. No one understands quite how things can spin out of control if you hit not one organ system, but two or three at the same time, and how difficult it is to come back from that like an intensivist. Hugh, you and I met in, I want to say at a COP, I want to say in Mexico.
Mexico, it was in Cancun.
That's right. That's right. The UN Climate Change Conference. Back then, Hugh was there. I was a medical student, and there was one or two or four other people, and that was it. Right? There weren't that many people working on the links between health and climate change at that conference or around the world. Or if there were, we hadn't found each other. That world has changed. That world has radically accelerated forward. Fast enough? No, never fast enough. But the world is moving. The NHS, why would you care about climate change if you're a health professional? I probably don't need to cover that for a group like this. But what I do need to say, look, we all understand the impacts. You've seen the rest of the seminars that have been on. You all understand. We all understand the things that we need to do to respond. What is worth saying is that you're not alone. Every single year for the past 5 years, we have gone out, we the NHS have gone out and surveyed health professionals, got a pretty decent sample of all 1.4 million of us. Do you care about climate change? How much do you care about climate change? Ignore climate change. What do you want to see the NHS do more of? Every year, 9 out of 10 staff shout back, we want to see the NHS tackle climate change. We want to live and breathe the stuff that we know deep in our DNA. You're not alone. Right? It's worth reiterating. You're ever feeling, oh, should I really be doing this? Am I going to get called up by my colleagues? Quite the opposite. You're going to find 9 out of 10 of them are pushing you forward. The why is simple. The what for the NHS, net zero by 2040, by 2045. I'll repeat, is that fast enough? Absolutely not. We always need to go faster. The good thing about that is we know that we will. We know that these dates will come forward because history in this space, at least, has been a pretty decent predictor of the future. All of the dates have come forward over time as you look at them. The Climate Change Act 2008 was an 80% reduction target by 2050, had a net zero target somewhere into the latter mid-century. It's now net zero by 2050. It's going to come forward, I promise you. Why, what, how? Right, and this is where the interesting stuff comes. How, number one, not with long targets a long way in the future. No one cares about that. No one feels uncomfortable. So we have some interim targets, 80% reduction 6-7 years from now. That makes people uncomfortable. We have annual targets. We were really excited last week, the NHS was able to say that it hit its first year reduction target, 1,260 kilotons of carbon taken out of the atmosphere. Is it enough? No, never, ever enough. But to tell you the kinds of things that looks like, right? And I want to try to communicate that while we've cared about this for a solid decade, the whole time, Hugh, you and I have known each other, While we've cared about this, we've hit a step change. We are cranking it up an order of magnitude 5-6 years. 310 million pounds of investment out into the system for smarter buildings, more energy efficient buildings. I spent 4 hours yesterday reviewing the final draft of a new net zero hospital standard. You can't build a hospital in this country going forward unless it's built to net zero standards. Those sorts of things I think are really exciting for what they do for our estate. We look at medicines, we often talk about inhalers, we often talk about anesthetic gases, we often talk about nitrous. Particularly bad polluting gases. I reckon we're going to knock that on the head. Give us 2-3 years. We've taken some really significant steps forward in the last 18 months to move away from some of the worst polluting anesthetics. We're about to be able to pull together the analytics to target all of the leaks and problems we have with nitrous gas across the country. We've just put in place new incentive schemes for our primary care friends. Shift away, support patients to improve their asthma care, shift away from some of the worst polluting, some of the highest polluting inhalers. Transport, we're responsible for, God, it's anywhere between every single journey on the road to 1 in 4 are the statistics I sometimes hear. The NHS, we're big, right? So we're responsible for a lot of road traffic. We know a lot of that is unnecessary occasionally. And we could actually deliver better care if we delivered care a little closer to people's homes, if we delivered care a little more efficiently, if we would optimize the way that we delivered care. So we're looking at doing that, yes, but we're also looking at making sure when someone does need to come in, is the non-emergency patient transport system that's bringing them into an NHS site, is it zero emission? We've got a strategy now to get us there in about 10 years for the vehicles we know how to control. That's easy. Elon Musk is going to help with a lot of that. Right? That stuff is going to come for free to some extent. It's actually going to be cheaper. The harder stuff, ambulances, right? Things that I promise you no one except for the NHS is going to take and run with. No one except for a healthcare system quite our size could manage that. It's not ready yet, and I'll trust everyone to keep it just a little quiet. 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks, I promise you, we're going to be not just unveiling, but driving the world's first zero emission ambulances, a rural ambulance and an urban ambulance. 2 different ranges. The urban takes on electric, the rural takes on electric and hydrogen. It's a hybrid with a range extender. It's going to be the world's first. We're going to unveil it up in Glasgow at COP. It's going to be really exciting. Estates, medicine, transport, all of that stuff's important. It's worth being clear. Our supply chain, 80,000 suppliers, over 60 billion pounds worth of stuff we purchase, we prescribe, we consume every single year. We've done one more thing. Within the decade, we said the NHS will no longer purchase from any supplier that does not meet or exceed our criteria, our trajectory on net zero. We published just last week what we mean by that. We mean 2 things. 2023 onwards, April 2023 onwards, contracts over £5 million. If you want to win one of those, £5 million a year, you want to win one of those for the NHS, you have to be able to demonstrate to us that your company is heading in the same direction as we are. We're not interested in doing business with companies that aren't. 2027, every single contract, full stop. Every single contract the NHS signs, every award given as a qualifying criteria, not as a we'll wait at 10%, as a qualifying criteria for that award, got to be aligned with our net zero trajectory. There is so much that is going on. I hope I can convey, I hope I'm conveying a step change in what's happening, that things are really, really ramping up. That's exciting. We can do some stuff. Bearded bureaucrats somewhere in London though, right? Not that interesting. There's a limit to the kinds of stuff we can do. To be honest, this stuff only really happens. We only really hit that net zero target and commitment 2040 or hey, earlier, if we have not 1, not 2, but 1.4 million decisions, sustainable healthcare decisions made every single day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, take a break Sunday, start again Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. And your leadership is very, very welcome here. I'm not going to grill you with questions now because we've got plenty of time to have conversations in a moment about how we work with you, because one of the things about this is it's very disempowering, isn't it? You look at international negotiations and go, oh my God, I can't influence the COP process. And you look at the national one, you go, well, Nick's doing that, but I don't know how to work with him. We'll come back to you on that because I think you want us to work with you and we need to know from you in a little while how we best do that. But let's now take that big grand vision and is putting the chess pieces in place to win the game. But the player sitting at the board, or one of them, is James Dixon, who is our next speaker. And James was reminding, we probably met at much the same time that I met with you, Nick, all those years ago, but we met rather than in Cancun, we met in Cambridge. So Nick's been walking the walk and talking the talk for over 15 years in the environment and sustainability space. He's a chartered environmentalist and a fellow of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And he is Associate Director of Sustainability of a rather important trust, which is Newcastle upon Tyne Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. They were quick off the blocks here in declaring that there was a climate emergency. And they made that statement in June 2019. And as James will tell you, that wasn't a decision made for a bit of greenwash. He's leading real change. And we'd love to learn from you, James, if you tell us what you're doing and what we can learn from you about what we can do in our own trusts. James, over to you.
Thanks, Hugh. And I've got a bit of a dodgy connection here, so fingers crossed it works. But if I mute my video, I turn my video off, then it might help. But thanks for that introduction. I'll try and slide share now for everyone and take it from here. So hopefully you can see. So thank you very much for the invite. Fantastic. And really good to hear from Nick and frame it from a national level. And what I'll try and do here today is to give you an idea of what hospitals can do, and certainly share the journey that we've been on for the last 11 years that I've been with the trust, and then more recently some of the things that we're doing that will hopefully help you in your role. So a little bit about Newcastle Hospitals. Hugh's just touched on it there. So we're all the way in the northeast there. You know, people think the Manchester is the north, but no, you have to keep going a little bit further before you get to Scotland. There's some metrics there that will resonate with some people. It's just to give you an idea of scale. We're one of the Shelford trusts, and you know, we've got a good clinical reputation that we've got a lot of Geordie pride about that as well. And as Hugh just alluded to, first healthcare organisation in the world to declare a climate emergency. So early days, I'll not go through all of these, but it just tells you I landed in 2010. I was the waste officer at the trust, but an environmentalist by background. So I was tasked with doing a lot of waste management related work. So hit the ground running. There was hardly any recycling in the trust, everything going to landfill. So it was a blank canvas. Great. But in doing that work, I found where the passion lies. So I had to go out and tread the boards in the wards and departments. And you would always find the green champion that I later called them. So if Mary was the one that always hit the doctors over the head with the newspaper and said that should go in the recycling bin, Mary was my green champion. Didn't matter whether Mary was the healthcare assistant or the sister. So that really worked to establish a bit of a network of allies that I could work with. A big trust, you know, I think we're about 15,000 staff at the time, over 3 main sites. It was really hard as a newbie to kind of get in there. But on the side, you can see the top of the slide, trying to establish a bit of governance. I went to the training that Hugh touched on there, the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, David Pension there, you can see in the image. And that helped with a great grounding, but the day job was waste. So some things that happened before I even started with the trust, I'm very proud of. That's about the sexiest image you'll get of an on-site combined heat and power energy centre on the left-hand side. Great at the time for carbon emissions and money saving, because you generate your electricity on site and the waste heat is used really efficiently to heat the water in the showers in the hospital. However, it's fossil fuel gas. Now we need to move away from that as we'll get further on. And then that's a reusable sharps box on the left-hand side. Circular economy principles, 90% reduction in life cycle carbon emissions associated with sharps disposal compared to your traditional sharp bins. So I had nothing to do with that, but I wish I had shares in the company, because great process and really good, something that we're aligned with. And we should have it across the patch in the NHS, to be honest. So that was the early days. And then moving on with that kind of passion, I started to develop a bit of a team. So I wasn't a one-man band anymore. We had an energy manager, a waste manager, and some sustainability officers. Now, that was an opportunity I was lucky enough to exploit. There was a time where I could have jumped at that point because we weren't getting the true top level support and resource needed, mapping it to other organizations. They had more, some senior sustainability managers, but thankfully I didn't jump, and the story doesn't end there. So pulled a bit of a team together with some opportunities in our directorate, then established an identity and a direction, which is SHINE. That's our sustainable healthcare in Newcastle. And they've got 8 shine themes. So this shows that sustainability is wider than your traditional carbon metrics and the green lines on the top there, what a lot of people associate it with. This gets into all of the other aspects of sustainability. And it just showed people with some of the comms and engagement work we could do, where they fit in and where they could help. So now, securing true leadership support. So what can you do in an organization? This was a dark time for me, 2018. I'm a professional tree hugger, essentially. Been doing this for a long time, incremental changes in a big organization. Thought that was good. IPCC report came out in 2018, said we were absolutely screwed. I was, what I know now to be suffering from eco-anxiety. I was in a real depression. I had young kids. I still have young kids. Really feared about their future. Was I doing enough? Should I jack this work in and go and do pro bono stuff? I was getting more involved with activism outside of work, activism with a little a. I was trained up to get arrested, but I never did. And at this time, it was a real conflict for us. The roller coaster is where that represents that period of time where I was honest with my director and said, we need to do more. I had other responsibilities as well as sustainability, and it was not true to the passion that I had. And I said, look, I need to apply myself more, or I'm going to leave, or I'm going to get arrested. So thankfully, he was really receptive. He said, well, why don't you pull together a 1-page at a board to say what the science is and what we need to do a bit more? About that time, climate emergency became a thing. Local authorities were starting to declare climate emergency, so it was a hook I could use. So pulled that 1-page of my life together. Lots of queries around affordability and financial constraints, and can we actually deliver if we commit to it? Manage that through the execs back and forward. Then there was the last ditch attempt with the little Greta book you can see there. So I'd been reading this to my kids, bedtime stories, as well as the nice happy ones as well. But this inspiring young girl who was telling it how it is. I thought, what more can I do with this last paper that's going to execs before board? I know, I'll buy a copy for Dame Jackie Daniel, our CEO. Now, I'm not going to get done for bribery with £3, at Waterstones. So thankfully did that, biked in one day, dropped it off with a PA because, my God, I'm a shy Ben from Northumberland. I don't go and see the CEO. So I dropped it off with a PA and just said, look, Ali, you've got to give this to Dame Jackie before the exec meeting. There's a little note in there, draw her to the quote about cathedral thinking, and we've got to be brave. Anyway, thought I'd done as much as I can. Lovely email afterwards, Dame Jackie with loads of exclamation marks saying, James, just to let you know, we approved it. Now, naive me thought that was just the end of the story, and we had to then, at that stage, and we had to go to board to get it drummed up. But once all the execs are aligned, this is my naivety of senior management, pretty much it's a done deal. So then Channel 4 News got a hold of it, and we did become the first to declare. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is because, as you hopefully all know on this call, the climate emergency is a health emergency. If we are going to be focused on health as organizations, why on earth aren't we treating this like the emergency that it is? It's threatening our patient population health, global population health. It's strain on services, bringing more people through the front door with all the pollution that we're generating. You guys know all of that. So I aligned it actually with Extinction Rebellion's 3 asks. So tell the truth. This is a public acknowledgement of the climate crisis, which threatens population health. Act now. So that, just as Nick touched on there, fast tracking carbon emission reductions, not just because the science asks us to, but the Paris global equity goals that actually say we've got a great quality of life that's got us here through the pollution that we've done. We absolutely have a requirement to cut that down rapidly. And then collaborative action, because the Citizens Assembly in NHS terms is quite difficult, although, it might be on Nick's to-do list. But collaborative action with our civic partners. So if it's a priority for the university and the council, it should be a priority for us. So why did we declare? It resonated because it's a global health threat. Nick and others have been involved in really framing this well as part of the Lancet countdown. The science is telling us we need to do more. The Hippocratic Oath says we shouldn't be doing harm. So bloody hell, we're going to have to act. Public opinion was up. I'm not having climate denial conversations with people anymore. Back are those days when that was wasting my energy. People get it. And then because it was an important aspect of our local civic partners. Now, as Hugh said, this wasn't just a greenwash, big public declaration, then do nout and carry on. It was, we started to ramp it up. Now, I'll be honest, and I didn't know what it would come. We were the first. I wanted to get people to feel the fear and act on it like I did. I didn't quite know what that would build up to, but I'll not go through all of these, but this is some of the stuff that we managed to do. So I've actually got the Climate Emergency Exec Oversight Group in about 8 minutes or something. So that's why I can't stay till after. But Richard is going to do a sterling effort in my place. But banning diesel. Why on earth were we allowing new diesel vehicles on hire and lease in an urban environment when we know the life limiting aspect of that? And then last year, this is in our Shine report again, I'll not go through it all, but it's just continued progress. Not enough. 5% reduction in direct carbon emissions. We've committed to a Tyndall curve aligned 12.8% reduction to measure against us, because that's what Paris says on both science and global equity. So we are doing well, still not enough. And then I'll just go with national context. So Nick, you'll be in there somewhere, but this was the first meeting of the expert panel that Nick actually chaired. Dame Jackie was the only healthcare provider there. That there was a lot of big thinkers in there in academia and leaders, but Dame Jackie was there representing providers. So we had a hand in that after we put our head above the parapet. So we're really proud of that. Our carbon footprint, this is just a bit of a COVID example, but you can see we've made great progress here on anesthetic gases, trust fleet, decarbonisation, inhalers, business travel, big COVID impact there. But there you have other supply chain. That's where all your PPE and other bits are in, big increase in carbon. There's a bit of a health warning with these figures because it's based on spend code analysis. So it's really hard in your supply chain emissions. But building energy fossil fuels, only a 2% reduction. It's not enough. So there's a lot of work to be done with capital investment in estates terms. So what have we done? What's our strategy? What's some of the actions we've done? So there's a link to our climate emergency strategy. It is aligned. It's similar to a green plan that's asked of every organization now from the Greener NHS team. 3 high-level goals: zero carbon care, clean air, and zero waste. There's interim targets from them. I'll not go through them all, but it just means that the zero carbon care, we're a bit, we're trying to be more ambitious than what the national ask is. The action plan is then a 5-year action plan, break down into these 8 Shine themes that I touched on earlier. And every page says what we want to achieve by 25, how we're going to achieve it, and how we're going to measure it. And this is an example of the pages. Again, I'll not go through that, but this is waste. And then I'll tell you what we have done. So here's some actual examples. So what can you get involved in? How can you get involved? I'll touch on later on. But this is our red, amber, green breakdown of all of the complexities of healthcare waste management. So me and Richard could probably bore you to death with this kind of stuff, but we categorize all our waste categories into 3. So hazardous waste that has to go away for incineration, energy from waste, which is a mix of your black bag general waste, but also your offensive waste that you might see on the wards and departments, that is a tiger bag, and then your recycling and your reuse. This was our aspiration in 2020. We actually were on a fantastic trajectory of the worst kind of waste on the lowest of the waste hierarchy. COVID had a bit of an impact here, but we've not quite got there with recycling. We'd aim for 35%. So what are we doing? Well, this is some things that we've been doing for a long time. Circular economy reuse on the sharps boxes, board-based containers rather than rigid plastic for medicines, anatomical waste and other things we have to get rid of. Real deep dives and audits and working with wards and departments to make them aware and doing some dedicated training on induction for all new staff. This is food waste. So quick win was packaged food waste. It's shocking to look at these photos and it's an embarrassing, really. Waste that either goes out of date or is returned by patients, but it's a difficult waste stream. It's packaged. So this goes to a specialist provider that can depackage the plastic, send that to energy recovery, and the food element is actually going for anaerobic digestion, and it generates gas for the grid, which offsets a small proportion of fossil fuels in the gas that we burn. And that's that. This is a dewatering machine. So again, instead of macerating and going to drain, which is very common in NHS terms, which is a nightmare for water and sewerage undertakers and highly intensive carbon wise, we can dewater it. And then you've got this, which actually looks like a nice ingredient for some curry or something, but that's what comes out, and then you can actually use that as another resource. This is one little example. We set up a climate emergency action fund after we declared, because one of the challenges with staff-led projects is they need a bit of pump priming of, demo projects of, reuse versus single use. Here's an excellent example from labs. So we think 1 million speci bags. You guys will be very familiar with it. You take a sample, you put it in a little plastic bag, and then you pass it on back to the labs for diagnostics. We've got rid of those 1 million small plastic bags, and we use a reusable vacuette transporter, and that's been validated after a trial project that we did. Journeys, you guys will be doing this already, I'm sure. Active travel to work and commute, but whilst you're on the job. So physios, school health visitors, trial e-bikes and cargo bikes, where we used to use combustion engine vehicles. E-cargo courier bikes. So this was a one that we were doing between hospital sites, records and samples, but also route planning for, this was during COVID, sending meds back to, so instead of a patient coming in to collect their specialist meds from a hospital, which is a nightmare for parking and very stressful, we can do a milk run with an e-cargo bike. So, you know, COVID has given us that innovation where we set off with some e-cargo bikes, and you can see that little map around the city. COVID impact, we've seen a big drop in public transport use, but a big increase in active travel. So cycling and walking. Now, how can we lock that in? So that's the COVID impact of 2021. How can we incentivize that and get better infrastructure for people? Buildings and land. Nick's already touched on the net zero carbon hospital standard. We're engaging, and Richard just trying to do this as well in Cambridge, of going beyond that to adopt passive house principles. Now, this has never really been done in healthcare before. It's really fabric first design so that you really drop all the energy down to the lowest possible. And we've got 2 new builds proposed for the RVI. One is in the HIP program, one isn't. And we're trying to go beyond what is the minimum standard there and really push the boundaries. And that's really good. You know, we're finding that architects and M&E designers are so enthused by this because it's not the normal. It's just can't afford this usual. Care, this is probably where you guys want to hear about. So working with our renal team and Sustainable Healthcare Coalition to fully map the renal care pathway and see where the carbon hotspots are, so you can actually make intervention as clinicians to see what is the lower carbon one. It's easy to say lower the carbon of your care pathway, but how can you personally go out there and do that? How do you know which drug is lower carbon than the other drug, but still might have the same clinical benefit? So we're doing well in nephrology. Nick's already touched on the 2 key priorities that we've got good metrics on: anesthesia and respiratory work. So lower carbon inhalers, the old blue puffer that my wife was on. Thankfully, I changed her to a dry powder one a few years back. That's allowing us to drop the impact of inhaler prescriptions within the trust and secondary care. And then you can see the big drop here in anesthetic gases. Desflurane's really small one there, even though it's the worst, but we've still got this big chunk of Entonox. So that's the mix of nitrous and oxygen. Doing some work that I'll touch on in a second. Alcon, doing some work on carbon neutral cataract surgery. And then if you're thinking about improvement projects, some of you will have really good improvement faculties, QI faculties in your organizations. We're working with their IHI to embed SUS-QI principles. So look up, if you don't know already, the Center for Sustainable Healthcare, getting sustainability embedded into every aspect of improvement. And we are working with IHI to bake that into everything. So it's not just me and the team doing things. Every little bit of culture change around improvement is going to have sustainability embedded. Some of you might have caught the baby that was delivered in Newcastle. It was standard Entonox, pain relief, analgesia. However, we used a machine that captured that exhaled gas and cracked it into harmless nitrogen and oxygen. So again, real challenges of how we can get these harmful gases that still have good clinical benefit. How can we stop them from harming the environment? And now this only happened from Chris Allen, our sustainable fellow, anesthesia fellow, and then we've got the MedCare team from Sweden who were pulling together this innovative technology that's well adopted in Scandinavia. And then we've got excellent consultant obs and gynae team and midwifery team that were receptive. So this is where you come in. If you can approach your estates teams, if you can approach your sustainability professionals in your organization, tell them that you want to get involved to lower carbon care, they will be very receptive. And then the last bit, which is the most important bit, is about engagement. So in our strategy, we've got a bit of a wheel that tells you, light touch. If you haven't got much time, follow us, read the strategy, sign up as a green champion. And then there's some training, Shine toolkits and Climate Emergency Action Fund, where it takes a little bit more of your time, but you get a lot more bang for the buck out of there. There's an app that we've got, Shine Rewards, that's available on the App Store or Google Play, and we've had a huge uptake. So this is in COVID time, you can see the big daily uptake there because everyone loves a freebie. So we had these charity tops with our logos on that if you signed up to Shine Rewards and delivered some active miles, then you would get a free top. Now, it just shows, I don't know if it's the British public, I don't know if it's international, but everybody loves a freebie. These are recycled plastic bottled polyester, so I might add. But it just shows, you know, that there was a real appetite. You can target interventions around care or active travel or procurement or waste, and it really gets staff really engaged in it. And then I just wanted to touch on the importance of collaboration, because there are people doing great things everywhere. You know, we share our work with the university, Newcastle University, and a city council. We're working across our ICS because, you know, we can't do this alone. Nationally, Dame Jackie shared a platform with Simon Stevens, and he used the words that we use: the climate emergency is a health emergency. And internationally, you know, Healthcare Without Harm are doing some great stuff. We're collaborating across Europe, and there's the Race to Zero that they're leading as well. And then I just wanted to leave this. You are a trusted voice. I think people have mentioned this on other webinars in this series. You know, if you guys talk about it, if you normalize the conversation about lowering the carbon embedded in your care pathway, then you will be trusted. If you think back to lessons from tobacco use, you know, when doctors were still smoking, and then when doctors stopped smoking, we saw a real input there. We can do the same on decarbonisation and meeting the climate emergency challenge. I do like to have a little dig at some doctors, though, that nurses are more trusted, just to keep you in your place. And that's it. There's some resources there at the end, and I'm really sorry I can't stay to answer any questions, but I know that Richard will be more than up to the task.
James, thank you so much for that. And I know that you have to rush away. Let me point out those resources. I was going to actually ask James to provide resources for us, but I think we can all learn from his recipe book. There's no point trying to bake the cake on your own without the recipe book. So let's try and get hold of everything you've got that you can teach us to make it easy for people. Some inspiring stuff there from Nick, of course, that we can all act in a year, and great stuff from James, because, you know, 12% a year coming down is absolutely right. We were a year ago talking about 8.2% a year. And that is inadequate. So to actually see a major trust like this exceeding those targets and matching the science with action is fantastic. So congratulations to you on that one too. And finally, the other bit I got out of that was the fact that individuals can make the difference. I mean, you have as an individual, and you talked about the role of that one fellow, your fellow working there, who introduced those changes too. So there's no reason why any single person listening to this talk can't learn from you and from that fellow and emulate the great things you've done. But thank you very much. Let me let you run to chair your own board, and we will move on. Thank you. We're moving on because we've gone from macro to our own domain. So we started with the whole of Great Britain's health services and how we go to zero carbon. We've now moved to what trusts can do and how we can work with our trust boards. We're now going to hear from Richard, who's from Professor Tom Bean, who's head of operations at intensive care unit at the Clinic for Anesthesiology, University Hospital Regensburg. Now, there aren't many people in the world who've actually mapped carbon footprints in intensive care and have worked out in our domain of intensive care what we can do as health professionals. And whenever I'm trying to find someone to talk about this, I find it really difficult. There are only a couple of names in the world that have actually addressed this. And we're very lucky to have Tom with us because he's one of those individuals. So we've got Tom's talk, and then we're going to go to a discussion after that. So Tom, let's hear from you. Teach us what you've got, and then we'll come back and talk in a moment. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the next 15 minutes, I would like to discuss with you the importance and impact of climate change on a professional level. In the example of intensive care medicine, how can intensive care medicine contribute to a reduction of carbon footprint and emission of greenhouse gases? No doubt, intensive care medicine has grown in the last 2 decades to an important part of a high technical and personal medicine, offering organ replacement therapies and all other kinds of technical procedures to save lives of critically ill patients. The precise contribution of critical care medicine to environmental harm is not clear in the moment, but there is no doubt that energy and water consumption, the use of single-use devices and waste production may have a global warming potential of the ICU. So in the next minutes I would like to shortly introduce and discuss some aspects of the footprint possibility of drugs, consumables, waste, energy, and the importance of research and training. In recent years, the method of life cycle assessment has been important to assess the global warming capacity or harm of certain devices which are used in intensive care medicine. Life cycle assessment is a cradle-to-grave or cradle-to-cradle analysis technique to assess environmental impacts, that means in general carbon footprint, associated with all the stages of a product's life, which is from raw material extraction through materials processing, manufacture, distribution, and finally use in the intensive care unit. Specific aspects of life cycle assessments are the discussion or the assessment of single versus or multi-use items, like face masks, like breathing circuits, like linen, like sterile cover, like plastic or glass bags, and, for example, blood pressure cuffs. In this interesting study, the life cycles of reusable and single-use central venous catheters used to aid the insertion of central venous catheters in the ICU or in the operating rooms was examined. As a main result, it was found that for the reusable kit, sterilization had the greatest environmental cost, and for the single-use kit, the manufacture of plastic and metal components had the largest environmental costs. And the authors concluded that inclusive of labor, the reusable central venous catheter insertion kits were less expensive than were the single-use kits. And for the hospital, which uses brown coal-sourced electricity, the environmental costs of the reusable kit were considerably greater than those of the single-use kits. So, efforts to reduce the environmental footprint of reusable items should be directed towards decreasing the water and energy consumed in cleaning and sterilization. In this study, a life cycle assessment of the environmental footprint of morphine was assessed, from opium poppy farming to the packaged drug. Morphine sulfate, 100 mg in 100 ml solved, had a climate change effect of 204 gram CO2 equivalent, which is approximating the CO2 equivalent emissions of driving an average car 1 kilometer. Interestingly, almost 90% of CO2 emission occurred during the final stages of 100 mg of morphine manufacture. Poppy farming, pelletizing and manufacturing made smaller contributions to CO2 emissions, but the final stages of morphine production, particularly sterilization and packaging, contributed to almost 90% of morphine's carbon footprint. So, focused measures to improve the energy efficiency and sources for drug sterilization and packaging could be explored, and these aspects are relevant to all drugs, not only to morphine. In this study, a life cycle assessment was performed to determine the environmental footprint of the care of patients with septic shock in the intensive care unit. It was a prospective observational study examining the use of energy for heating, ventilation and air conditioning, lighting, machines and all consumables and waste associated with treating 10 patients with septic shock in the ICU at a hospital in the United States and at a hospital in Australia. The main results were that energy use per patient averaged 272 kilowatt hours per day for the US and nearly the half for the Australian. The average daily particulate greenhouse gas emissions arising from treating patients in the US ICU was 178 kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent, while it was for the Australian ICU 88 kilogram. Energy accounted for 155 kilogram CO2 equivalent in the US ICU, that means 87%, and 67 kilogram for the Australian ICU, that means 76%. The daily treatment of one patient with septic shock in the US ICU was equivalent to the total daily carbon footprint of 3.5 Americans. The authors concluded that carbon footprints of the ICUs were dominated by the energy use for heating, ventilation and air conditioning, while consumables were relatively less important, with limited effect of intensity of patient care. The authors feel that there is a large opportunity for reducing the ICU's carbon footprint by improving the energy efficiency of buildings and increasing the use of renewable energy sources. Here I present an audit of intensive care unit recyclable waste to you. In this study, for 7 consecutive days in an Australian 10-bedded intensive care unit, all waste was prospectively sorted. The total intensive care unit waste for the week was 540 kilogram, representing 5% of hospital waste. Of the 401 kilogram of intensive care unit general waste, recyclables were 230 kilogram, mainly plastics, cardboard and paper. There were only 0.4 kilogram of infectious cross-contamination in the 401 kilogram of general waste. Intensive care unit waste was a small proportion of all hospital waste. However, there was minimal infectious waste cross-contamination, and almost 60% of intensive care unit general waste could be recycled with appropriate safeguards, education and training. In summary, you may see from this figure that concepts of environmental sustainability in intensive care may include life cycle assessments of drugs in terms of production, package and transportation, might include the handling of consumables, a critical analysis of single-use material and package, might a reduction in energy and water, renewable energy resources and water consumption control, and the 5R concept for waste, meaning reduce, reuse, recycle, rethink and research, and last but not least, a most important aspect, avoid futile treatment in patients. That means avoid inappropriate interventions or prolongations of therapies where no possibility of recovery is possible for the patient. And this aspect, for my opinion, plays an important role in the concepts of environmental sustainability. The concept of environmental sustainability in anesthesia and critical care inheres three important topics. First, the scientific foundation for environmental sustainability in anesthesia and critical care has progressed rapidly during the past decade, particularly with the incorporation of environmental life cycle assessments. Second, as a result of these new studies, anesthetists and critical care physicians can make informed choices to reduce their environmental footprint. And third, translational research on recent environmental footprinting studies into routine anesthetic ICU practice is particularly required, and furthermore, further studies, further life cycle assessments for all aspects of intensive care medicine are required urgently for the future. So, finally and shortly, I would like to present 8 steps to environmental sustainability in intensive care to you. First, develop plans for turning off lights, computer monitors and televisions when not in use. Second, develop systems for maximizing optimal temperatures using thermostat settings, blinds and lighting. Third, reduce waste by recycling, reusing, using reusable gowns and not opening equipment until you are certain it is needed. Fourth, switch to green products and encourage your hospital or your administration for such a change. Fifth, join or create a green team to discuss and to decide on green products in the hospital. 6, create a green action plan to follow standards which you can create. 9th, join organizations such as alliances for healthy hospitals or green hospitals. And 8th, give a push to further studies on life cycle assessments. Maria Neira, the Director of Public Health and Environment of the World Health Organization, pointed out that we physicians have to get our own house in order. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thomas, that was terrific. Thank you very much indeed. And some strong echoes there from other speakers. The forming of green teams, ganging up with people on your unit, finding other people in your hospital to work with, finding those in other hospitals that can work with your hospital. I was also thinking too of the do less bit. It's the thing we often forget about is sometimes the most efficient thing is not to do it in the first place. And that makes a huge saving too. Futility is on all of our radars. We need to pay attention. Thomas is correct. If we continue to admit people, prolong their suffering, we're not just hurting them and their families, we're hurting our planet at the same time too. And that boring stuff of going around is just switching stuff off. I drive my staff probably not slightly mad by the fact that I wander around switching lights off in cupboards. Right, we have 10 minutes to try to draw this together. So I'm going to try to pull out some action points for every single person, whether you're a trainee, any discipline, any level of seniority. So Nick, I'm going to start with you. You're leading things nationally, but you need us to engage with you. So what I'd like to ask you is, what's the ask of everyone listening to this as they play on catch up or live? What do you want them to do to make your life easier, to lubricate the path for a broader carbon zero NHS? Let me just say, by the way, to those of you listening into this directly, there is a Q&A button. You're welcome to put a question or answer in there. And I think Eleanor can keep an eye on that and chip in as she gets live questions coming in. So Nick, what do we do to lubricate the path that you're trying to lay?
3 things. First thing, let's start at the role of the individual and work out. The first thing, take a look at your clinical practice. Take a look at your, way you carry yourself throughout the day. Think about one thing. Don't worry about what the biggest single, thing you can do is. Don't worry about what the perfect intervention or action is, because there isn't a perfect intervention and there isn't a perfect action. And this isn't one thing we need to do. It's 1.4 million things we need to do. Pick one thing and do it. Do it today, do it tomorrow, keep going, build up, right? In some ways, a net zero healthcare system, it doesn't exist. So we don't know what that world is going to look like 20 years from now. We're going to have to build that together, and that's going to be tough. So do one thing in your clinical world, and then, yes, obviously go and do another 100. Building out though, right? We're healthcare professionals. We have agency, yes, over our clinical practice, but also over the way that our trust, over the way that our integrated care system, over the way that our primary care network or our clinic, it behaves. We've been very clear. We expect every single, and it's part of the standard contract that we sign with every single trust now, we expect every single trust and every single integrated care system across the country to have its own localized, personalized, internalized net zero strategy. If your trust doesn't have one, ask why not. If it does have one, go and support them. Tell the people driving that they have clinicians behind them, that there are doctors, that there are nurses, that there are people there that want to see this not go, tinkering around the edges, but go further and go faster. Those net zero strategies, they're not going to be perfect in year 1 or year 2, but we're going to build these up over time, right? We know that we have 155 of these ready across the country already. In the last 12 months, we've been pulling together. We've got to get to 250. No choice. Do one thing yourself. Do one thing with your organization. Number 3, shout loud. James in his diagram, his last slide, I think is spot on. Never forget the power of a trusted messenger. Never forget the power of a salient story. Repeat yourself again and again and again. And just when you think that everyone has heard you say the climate crisis is a health crisis, keep going.
Thank you very much, Nick. I see some questions beginning to appear there. I'm going to ask a question of Richard, who's standing in for James, and Thomas. How do you talk about building these alliances, these networks of people who act together? And I agree with you. We're hearing the Society of Acute Medicine wanting to act, College of Anaesthetists, intensivists. There's probably a lot of people in every trust that are thinking what we're thinking. What's your advice, both of you, about gluing those people together to get immediate action on the scale and pace that we require? What would you tell our members and those listening in to do? Let's start with you, Richard, and then come to Thomas. What do we do to build those networks of action?
Thank you. I think what we've had quite a lot of success with, and it's building success here, is at the small team level, and that's getting small teams to sit down and work through their day in the life. We've mapped 2 or 3, and they've come up really usefully. What they do is basically you just think everything you do from when you get up in the morning, because frankly you're already thinking about work, then you're getting to work. You do stuff when you get to work, then you have your whole normal day. And if during that whole process you think of everything you consume and put it on a bit of paper, and if you do it as a group, you'll find that will run to 3 or 4 pages. Now that helps people like myself and anyone else. Then you come and talk to us and you say, what can I do about that? What can I do about this? And then you refine your list of immediates, medium term, long term. And within a very short time, you've worked out a plan of what you can do and sort out. You can fit that into standard like programs. James was talking about, the reward site programs. We have a Think Green Impact program that works in the same sort of way. You can use that, but at the same time, you can entirely do your own thing and become very autonomous in trying to sort out your local team and what you do. So I think that kind of day in the life tool, which is something we're trying to work up into a more practical, accessible form, is an excellent way to think of starting getting going, because it's that, what do you do when you first sit down? And I think that's a great way to begin.
That's fantastic, and thank you for that. And I think we could all, I'm going to go and do that. That's, I think, something we could all do. And we're going to ask the same question of Thomas, and also introduce, there's a question from Ria here, and making, you know, a good point.
Yes.
When I try to promote sustainability, it's sometimes met with a groan, especially when people are so tired and worn down with the pandemic. How can we turn this from being another virtuous pain in the neck into something we feel inspired to do, as opposed to, you know, someone like Ria just sounding like a stuck record? Thomas, how have you succeeded in doing that? How do you get people motivated?
I think we have to work on 3 levels simultaneously. On the micro level, in each ICU, in each hospital, you have to find engaged people to build a green team for each, on a micro level for the ICU, to check all the waste, to check all the lightnings, to give small guidelines for the ICU. The meso level would be the hospital, to have closer connections to the administration, to convince the administration on these ideas, to collaborate with the administration, to give more weight from the clinicians to the administration. And the third one is my paper in intensive care medicine had a big reaction. I got much reactions on this, and I think we have in German daily annually ICU congresses, symposia. In every symposium, it must be a session on sustainability in intensive care medicine and in the anesthetic practice. The people want to be informed. They do not take a book in their hand, but they go to congresses or symposia, and they want to be confronted with these new ideas. And I think these are the 3 levels where we have simultaneously work very engaged to change things in the next 2 or 3 years.
Thomas, I think those are really well-made points. And so again, we're hearing, get your team together. You can start with your team in intensive care. It doesn't matter whether you're the consultant or the cleaner, you can do this together. Find others and get them to do the same so that you can link up. Inform people. I do think that's very important. The Intensive Care Society is making these webinars freely available. You can arrange for them to be shown in grand rounds, for instance. That's absolutely fine through the hospital. There's no charge for any of that at all. So let's inform people. The other point I think you made, which I think was excellent, is that interface with what we just actually heard from Richard. We've got to take the solutions and the problems to the people who can act at the trust level. Now, my experience is that if you go and speak to the person in charge of estates, you find out who the trust sustainability officer is. You find often the non-executive director who is trying to hold the feet to the flames of the trust. Those are the people that you need to interact with. If you go straight to the chair of the board, they'll probably tell you where to go. They obviously didn't in Newcastle, but they would in a lot of other places because they've got their 4-hour wait targets and so forth. So let's act local, start small on our units and take it to our NEDs, estates and sustainability officers as well. There's a question come in from Richard about what we're going to be doing about the COP process. Well, I'm sure Thomas is doing the same in Germany that we're doing here. There is a lot of presence at the COP negotiations, less than we would have liked. Health was going to be one of 3 pillars for the COP this year, and it got moved to the side on that. But nonetheless, it is important for us to sing loudly. A lot of us engaged. I'm working with some such as Cancer Research UK on this. I know there are a whole bunch of paediatricians cycling up from Great Ormond Street to COP to raise the process. Nick, waving out to Nick, was the man who, as a medical student, got the first mention of health into the COP text, which is extraordinary, isn't it? There was no mention of health before Nick. So we will be there en masse. Whether we have much influence, I don't altogether know, but we shall be there. Now, we've overrun by 1 minute, and I don't want us to bore people. So I'd like to just give everyone the opportunity going round again. I'm going to start in the same order, Nick, then Richard, then Thomas. And I want another clear, we don't want waffle. I don't want ethereal good things. I want your one, it could be what you said before, I just want one action point that everyone does tomorrow that's listening to this. Nick, one action.
Every single person, find the email address of your chief executive and email them and ask them 2 questions. Do we have a green plan? Do we have a board level lead that is going to drive this through over the next couple of years? If not, why not?
Fantastic. Okay, let's all do that. Let's move then. Richard, what, I mean, you've already done this, you're living in utopia, but for us that living in the sort of seventh circles of hell, what do we do?
It's just simply talk to each other in a group, decide what you consume. The problem is it's a consumption problem. It's what we consume and how we consume it. If you think really hard about that and try and do something about it, and face it, there is going to be resistance in that system, and it's tackling that resistance that is where you get what stops you feeling fed up with it all, because you're tackling something that's wrong.
Good. And that feeling of fighting the good fight with other people is quite empowering, isn't it? It's not demoralizing. Thomas, different healthcare system, but tell us what's the one thing that we should all be doing in Britain and Europe more broadly tomorrow?
Tomorrow, go to your ICU, begin discussions with physicians about futility and ethics on your ICU, unnecessary or futile treatments, and begin discussions with the nurses on electricity, waste, and some proud ideas to find new ways to reduce all the life cycles which you have on the ICU.
Thank you. And I think that points, Eleanor, who's on this call, made a good point yesterday that, you know, if we, for instance, acted with antibiotic stewardship to limit our antibiotic prescriptions in a way that's beneficial to patients and antimicrobial resistance, by just not prescribing those unnecessary antibiotics, we also have a net carbon benefit. And some of those antibiotics are carbon intensive to manufacture. So there we are. Do less, do what we can better, and talk with each other to act.
So we need a sustainability stewardship on each ICU.
There you are. So everyone listen to this, you can now become self-nominated lord or lady or master or mistress of your empire. Eleanor, over to you. Have you any final comments on this? It was you that put these seminars together, so you take credit for this. What have you a parting message for everyone on this call?
Putting you in the spotlight. Thank you. No, just thank you for being here, and take the passion from all the speakers today with you. I think eco-anxiety, as James was referring to, is something I've certainly struggled with over the last years, but trying to fuel that into action if you can, with the excellent points made by our speakers today. Thank you.
Good. And Eleanor, you're of course an example of that, because you were a trainee who stood up and harangued the Intensive Care Society Council at a meeting, and we listened.
I did, yes.
And we're grateful for what you've done. So with that, thank you to the organising team, Eleanor for running these shows, Cass and Alex and the others in the office at the Intensive Care Society, all of our fantastic speakers. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed today. I'm feeling very energised by everything I've heard, because it gives you hope that we can work together. And my thanks to all of you for listening. Please do encourage others to go and listen to these seminars when they're not slaving over a hot patient. So once again, thank you all very much indeed. And we'll see you at the next seminar, which is on the 19th of October, 12:30. This will be discussion, actually it's a superb meeting, this one Ella's put together, on taking political action. So the speakers we have there are really amazing. She's got the head of policy for Friends of the Earth, the chair of Stop Ecocide International, a senior representative of Greenpeace, 2 representatives of Doctors for Extinction Rebellion, and a former Secretary of State. So what a top lineup for political action with a big and a small P. So please do join us then. Thank you now. Bye-bye.